We have lamotrigine, levetiracetam, gabapentin, oxcarbazepine, pregabalin, topiramate, vigabatrin, and zonisamide. There are also other molecules which are not included here, and you may come across them, but these are the ones that are largely used, especially in our country. So some of them can also be used for other conditions outside the cortex, like the spinal lesions or what we call peripheral nerve lesions, peripheral neuropathies. So we shall just select a few molecules and talk about them. Those who are joining in, please ensure that your microphones are muted. Please ensure that your microphones are muted because you are causing distraction on the background. Anybody not muting the microphone risks being thrown out of class. I can see Elvis Kipkurui. I'm not sure whether you are in attendance, but your microphone is always on. So let's briefly talk about phenytoin. We may not cover everything about it, but it's good to get some basic facts right. It's quite an old drug, almost running to a century in its use. It is an hydantoin. It is extracted from the diphenyl hydantoin, so making an hydantoin derivative. The major action of phenytoin is at the cell membrane level, where it alters the cations, conductants, mainly sodium, potassium, and calcium. They alter membrane potentials, and therefore they cause concentrations of amino acids. They destabilize stabilize the membrane, what we call membrane integrity and membrane potentials. So by influencing the cation, they also influence the amino acid concentrations within the cell. So when a cell is depolarized, they can easily hyperpolarize the cell, and that reduces the action potentials. They also have some influence on the neurotransmission, where they influence the accumulation of norepinephrine, acetylcholine, and GABA. So any drug which reduces the action potentials works through GABA, because GABA is an inhibitor. But again, they must also reduce the actions of catecholamines like norepinephrine or acetylcholine. Consequently, phenytoin blocks the sustained high-frequency repetitive firing of the action potentials, and these action potentials are the ones which cause serious seizures. So they block the sustained high-frequency repetitive firing, which is associated with the seizure activity. At what point do you use phenytoin? Because of its effectiveness at modulating the action potentials at the cell membrane level, they are used a lot in the management of partial seizures. These partial seizures can be simple, and they can also be secondary. As you know about seizures, we have those that are confined in certain regions of the brain. Those are called partial seizures. But we have those that have the capacity to spread, but they don't cross the midline. Those are the ones that we call the secondary. But we have those that can cross and also cause, can influence the action potential of the rest of the hemispheres, and those are what we call the secondary generalized. So we have partial seizures which can be simple, we have partial seizures which can be complex, and we also have partial seizures which can be generalized later. So we call them secondary generalized. So when you talk of GTC, we talk of generalized tonic-clonic seizures. It is usually very effective in what we call secondary generalized tonic-clonic seizures. Let me just explain that further. Anybody who has any comorbidity, anybody who has any lesion in the brain, they always have what we call secondary generalized tonic-clonic seizures, because the activation of the action potentials will start from that particular focal point before they spread out. So what we are trying to say is that any lesion which begins from a certain point spreads but does not become generalized. Those are the ones where you use phenytoin. When it comes to pharmacological properties, what we call pharmacokinetics, the absorption of these drugs is dose dependent and also formulation dependent. So we have different companies making different brands. Every brand may have its own absorption kinetics and also formulations. Some could be coated with sugar. Those formulations also influence the absorption rate. So this is a very, very erratic drug, especially when it comes to serum levels. And that explains why very few patients get controlled on phenytoin, because clinicians may not determine what really happens it's difficult to determine the serum levels. It is usually absorbed from the GIT completely, but then when it is given in the form of an injection, the absorption rate is not very much predictable. We have some some drug precipitation in the muscle may occur, where it might be retained in certain muscles, depending on the strength of those muscles and the bulk. So when it is given intramuscular, you cannot predict the absorption rate. However, it is up to 90% plasma bound. So the plasma binding is quite high. The therapeutic range is between 3 to 8 milligrams per kilogram body weight. That can be given as a loading dose. It can also be given as an intravenous drug, and can also be administered as oral drug. Once you start with that lower dose, then you use what we call the step ladder pattern in initiating the subsequent treatments. And these subsequent treatments must be titrated against seizure progress. When the seizures are increasing, then you need to follow the step ladder by increasing the dose very slowly. It is highly metabolized because it is highly plasma bound along the CYP450. A very small portion of this is excreted and changed, as the plasma binding is quite significant. The elimination half-life is dose dependent, but we know phenytoin can go up to a half-life of 100 hours. The metabolism of this drug follows what we call first-order kinetics when in low doses. First order means it is a linear line. But in high doses, it follows what we call zero-order kinetics. Zero-order kinetics means you cannot determine the dose. They cannot determine the serum levels based on the dose. A very small increase in the dose can lead to a very major increase in serum. And that explains why quite a number of patients who are put on this drug may develop paradoxical seizures. And on a very small withdrawal, the patients can go into status epilepticus. Further increases in dosage may produce very large changes in the phenytoin concentrations. And that is why toxicity is quite common with this drug. It can cause a lot of problems. Sorry, I'm still in class. Let me get back to you after class. So the half-life can average around 100 hours. In neonates, can even go further to 150. So the kinetics of this drug requires that for it to reach steady state, it requires up to 30 days. Usually half-life of a drug can determine the steady states. If you multiply half-life of a drug by 5, then you reach the steady states. And that explains why most antibiotics are used for 5 days, because the half-lives can be 1 day. But for phenytoin, up to 100 hours, the half-life can go up to 30 days. So in other words, patients put on phenytoin must wait for a whole month for the drug to be changed. What are the interactions? The interactions are largely related to protein binding and its metabolism. When given together with phenobab is known to displace it from the carrier molecule site, which leads to its increase in free molecule fraction, and that is dangerous. So when it is given together with phenytoin, with phenobarbital, you are likely to get, somebody is likely to get toxicity. It is a liver enzyme inducer, but it can inhibit the metabolism of isoniazid, inhibits its metabolism. So phenobab increases its metabolism, but isoniazid reduces its metabolism. Sorry, let's join the next session in the next less than 1 minute. It's already scheduled, so just join immediately. And ataxia, sedation, gingival hyperplasia, and also hirsutism. We talk about gingival hyperplasia because of the increase in the number of cells, but again, the enlargement of the gingival tissues is because of the chronic infection due to leukopenia, which is noticed, actually granulocytosis, which is noticed in most patients who are put on this drug. And this drug also causes coarsening of the facial features, what we call hirsutism, and also coarsening of the skin. It is a metabolizer, it's a stimulant of the P450. Consequently, it reduces the accumulation of vitamins in the liver, and that can lead to vitamin D deficiency. Megaloblastic anemia has been reported because of massive loss of folic acid through the same mechanism of liver stimulation. There is a idiosyncratic reaction which has been noticed with phenytoin, but patients who are on this drug also develop what we call pseudolymphadenopathy. The granulocytosis can be so severe that patients end up developing lymph node enlargement. So these are side effects which could be dose related. We could also have other non-dose related side effects, like when used in pregnancy, then it is known to reduce the concentration of combined oral contraceptives, and that can lead to subnormal serum levels and a possible pregnancy. So let's talk about carbamazepine. Carbamazepine is a derivative of the tricyclic antidepressants. We shall talk about antidepressive drugs, but there's a class of them called tricyclic compounds. These tricyclic compounds are very effective in the management of bipolar depression. And that explains why sometimes patients, when put on carbamazepine, the mood stabilization is noticed, and therefore these drugs can also be used in mood disorders. Initially, carbamazepine was marketed for the treatment of neuralgia, but with time it has been found to be very, very useful in seizure management. It has a lot of properties which are similar to those ones of phenytoin, including metabolism along zero order, but then when used for a long period of time, it follows what we call time index kinetics, where with the time, the body becomes more and more efficient in eliminating it. Its mechanism of action is similar to that of phenytoin because it blocks the sodium channels and inhibits high frequencies repetitive firing associated with instability of the cell membrane and therefore the distribution of the cations. It also has some limited presynaptic activity, which decreases the neuronal transmission. So this has everything to do with GABA accumulation and also effect on the catecholamines. It has also what we call maximal electroshock seizures. It has maximum activity on that. Let's look at its pharmacokinetics. When carbamazepine is administered orally, it is completely absorbed. When taken together with the meals, then it can be tolerated better because the meals slow its absorption. Once absorbed, the peak serum level is reached within 8 hours, between 6 and 8 hours. It has 70% plasma binding. It is an inducer just like phenytoin of the CYP 450. The plasma half-life is long, up to 36 hours, but not as long as that of phenytoin. When given for a long period of time, the half-life reduces. And this explains why there's need to increase the dose. It's completely metabolized and several derivatives are produced. Among them is the 10,11 epoxides. It is this particular metabolite which has anticonvulsant activity. Just like phenytoin, this drug is used in partial seizures, may also be used in secondary general tonic-clonic seizures. It can be used in trigeminal neuralgia, that is the peripheral nervous system, but it has also been found to act on moods, therefore very useful in bipolar disorders, but not all patients. It modulates the maniac phase of the bipolar, depressive, anxiety, depressive disorder. It's available in oral form. We also have what we call extended release preparations. The extended release preparations are those that are property which antagonizes the release into the serum. We call them slow release. So slow release formulations have longer half-life. So that's why we call them extended release preparations. When they are used, then you just need to give it twice. But those ordinary pills should be given 3 times. The troughs are usually experienced. In other words, when given, the stimulation of the cytokine microsomal system can be immediate, and that increases the release, the metabolism of this drug, and that can lead to trough levels. Trough levels mean low levels, which can go as low as 4 to 8 micrograms per milliliter. What are the drug interactions with carbamazepine? It is largely related to the drug enzyme-inducing properties. It can cause increased rate of metabolism of certain drugs like primidone or phenytoin or ethosuximide or even valproic acid and benzodiazepines. But it might also be antagonized by certain drugs like valproic acid. So valproic acid actually is a liver inhibitor, liver enzyme inhibitor. It will inhibit most of the drugs. So it can slow down the rate of drugs, the drug metabolism, and therefore when given together with this drug, then you can be assured the steady states will increase and the dose will build up. The dose in the body will build up and you are likely to see more side effects. So phenytoin, phenobarbital, those ones are by far stronger than liver enzyme inducers and may decrease the steady states by increasing the liver enzyme metabolism of this drug. So please mark that clearly, because you are going to get patients who are on multiple drugs. When you give carbamazepine together with phenobab or phenytoin, you must be rest assured that the steady states will decrease. That means they will reach the steady states very early. At the same time, the metabolism of this drug is increased. So getting serum concentrations which can be of therapeutic significance is very difficult. So you have to increase the dose of this carbamazepine so as to match the actions caused by those other two. When you give it together, with the valproic acid, then you know the buildup of this drug in serum is going to be high, and consequently you are likely to get side effects because valproic acid inhibits its release. So its clearance is decreased, inhibited by valproic acid, but stimulated by phenobab and phenytoin. Toxicity, mainly diplopia and ataxia, but not as much as it is in phenytoin. This drug is fairly safer than phenytoin, although they share a lot of indications. Because of diplopia and ataxia, that can be managed by dividing the dose. So you can give it 3 times or even 2 to 3 times. But again, we have what we call dose-related side effects. The direct effect should be mild GIT upsets, just like any other drug that is taken orally. Nausea and vomiting, constipation may also occur. Unsteadiness, this occurs because of its effects on the not association, the motor tracts, not association fibers. Drowsiness may also occur because of its accumulation in the initial days before the metabolism is enhanced. Hyponatremia and water intoxication have been reported. So patients who are put on this drug may end up having edema because of the hyponatremia. This drug usually produces very dangerous reactions, which are idiosyncratic in nature. They end up with dyskaryosis, like aplastic anemia and agranulocytosis. When they occur on the skin, it becomes a very, very dangerous condition called erythema multiforme, where the palms and the soles are simply removed and already dislodged. And because of that, somebody gets almost 80% disability, because when somebody does not have palms, or the palms are sore and also the soles are sore, walking and doing any other thing become very difficult. So maybe just to add on a few things about carbamazepine. Many times it is used in pregnancy or mothers who are pregnant. It is fairly safe. Because of that, it can cause teratogenic effects. Some of the teratogenic effects include neuronal tube defects. Neuronal tube defects are things like spina bifida or encephalomyelocele or meningomyelocele. Those ones may occur. At the same time, when used together for patients who are using family planning, they are known to reduce the doses of combined oral contraceptives, and that requires that those clients should have the dose range of estrogen way above 50 micrograms. That will mean this mother should be given 2 pills of COC to enhance the levels of estrogen. Many prototypes of COCs have around 57, not 57, but 27 micrograms of estrogen. So for you to reach 50, you need double that dose. And that should be taken note of, because in quite a number of instances, we still find these mothers conceiving despite being on these drugs. So let's proceed. There's another drug called oxcarbazepine. This still in the same category of drugs, just like carbamazepine, but is fairly safe, much safer. It has very short half-life of 1 to 2 hours. So its potential for causing any side effects is lower than carbamazepine. It is hydrolyzed very fast and therefore converted to active metabolites, which are similar to those of carbamazepine. Second, what I will call phase 2 reaction is through glucuronation, and there's no close reactivity with carbamazepine. So patients who are sensitive to it are still safe with carbamazepine. It is an liver enzyme inducer, but to a lesser extent. Hyponatremia occurs more commonly with oxcarbazepine than carbamazepine. So you have to balance out which one is better. So lastly, let us look at phenobarbital. Not lastly, but we shall also look at what we call valproic acid. It is important to learn about the classicals, because these classicals are the ones which are mainly in the market. The new drugs are there, but they are a little expensive, and therefore patients do not afford them on long term. Because of that, their clinical spectrum is lower compared to the classicals. But let's talk about phenobarbital. Phenobarbital is actually the first anti-seizure drug to have been used extensively. To date, it is the one that is used in most facilities, and probably because it is the only one available. So it is the oldest of the currently available anti-seizure drugs. There are other derivatives. It's a derivative of barbiturate. Others are methylbarbital, methabarbital, and primidone. Primidone, as I told you earlier, is already abolished. It's no longer in use. Methabarbital is methylated. Phenobarbital is also methylated, but both of them are demethylated when used in vivo. In vivo is in the human body. The mechanism of action of this drug is that the exact mechanism of action is not clearly understood. In fact, the person who discovered this molecule used it by accident, and eventually it worked. But the actual action is not understood up to now, and that is why it is used a lot in management of seizure disorders. However, it is postulated that it enhances inhibitory processes and diminishes excitatory neurotransmission, especially those ones that are mediated by sodium conductance. And that is known to work at very high concentrations. So when used, even with further concentrations, it blocks the calcium currents. But the most important mechanism of action of this drug is that it enhances the GABA receptor mediated inhibition through many mechanisms. It reduces the GABA enzyme actions, allowing GABA to build at the synaptic left, or it increases mechanisms that release GABA into the synaptic left. So it enhances GABA receptor mediated inhibition by prolonging the opening of the potassium channels, or not potassium, but chloride channels. Because of its main activity at the synaptic left, phenobarbital is largely used in the treatment of generalized tonic-clonic seizures, mainly generalized tonic-clonic seizures, especially the idiopathic types. But again, it has some activity on partial seizures. Because of the nature of this mechanism of action, as I told you earlier, it is used on virtually every seizure, especially the ones that are difficult to control with other medications. However, you should not use this drug in patients who have abscesses, because the mechanism of generating those seizures and abscesses is completely different and may not necessarily require the use of this drug. So it has no effectiveness, not even lately, in abscesses, atonic attacks, and even infantile spasms. So those children who have infantile spasms, please spare them of phenobarbital. It doesn't work. Those who have abscesses, spare them. Phenobarbital, they do not work. And those who have floppy, what we call the drop attacks, the atonic attacks, those ones also do not respond to phenobarbital. When this drug is used in certain patients, especially those patients who get attacks at night, nocturnal seizures, they get worse. They get worse because phenobarbital is known to interfere with the sleep polygram, increasing the phase of rapid eye movement sleep and deep sleep, and that is the period or the level where seizures do occur. It has higher side effects compared to other forms of barbiturates. But all in all, it is quite tolerable. It only depends on whether or not it can be given. It depends on how the dose and also the comorbidities that exist. Just to add a little more on phenobarbital, this is a drug that can make children, especially children, have hyperactivity because it slows down the mental processes. At the same time, it can cause a lot of sedation in adults. Sedation is not common in children. In fact, when it's used in children, they cause hyperactivity. When used in adults, it causes drowsiness. When used in pregnancy, it is highly associated with connective tissue disorders, cleft lip, cleft palate, and other intracardiac abnormalities like ASD and VSD. So, in as much as we use it regularly, it has those side effects. It can make hyperactive children be more hyperactive. It can make nocturnal attacks worse. And therefore, we must always be conscious of that. Primidone is no longer in use, and therefore we don't even need to spend a lot of time on it. There are other molecules which have come into the market, vigabatrin being one of them. But again, these are new drugs. What its mechanism of action is that it reversibly inhibits GABA aminotransferase, and this is the enzyme that is responsible for the degradation of GABA. So it leads to the buildup of GABA at the synaptic left, and that's why it is called vigabatrin. It increases the amount of GABA release at synaptic left, and that enhances inhibition. At the same time, it decreases glutamine synthetase activity in the second messenger to increase GABA concentrations. Just like phenobarbital, it's also effective in a range of seizures, so it can be used a lot in other seizures, particularly partial seizures and also what we call waste syndrome. When we'll be doing seizure disorders, then you learn about all these types of seizures. In fatal spasms, which are refractory to other treatments, they respond very well to vigabatrin. The pharmacokinetics, half-life is approximately 6 to 8 hours. Toxicities include drowsiness, dizziness, and weight loss. Weight gain, sorry. Then it is less common but more troublesome in adverse reactions, especially in agitation and patients who exhibit agitation, confusion, and psychosis. Long-term development of visual field defects, which may not be reversible, have also been noted in a third of the patients. So this drug may not be very safe. It might rarely cause these side effects, but when they occur, they are quite troublesome, especially the CNS or CNS manifestations like confusion, aggression, agitation, and even psychosis. It suppresses the sustained rapid firing. That means it acts at the cell membrane level. It can also produce voltage and user-dependent inactivation of sodium channels. That also occurs at the cell membrane level. It also acts on the voltage-activated sodium channels and may be used a lot in what we call focal epilepsy. So it is active in primary general chronic seizures, especially in childhood, and any drug that influences, especially the T-type of what we call the calcium-dependent channels. They are very good at controlling the absences. It also decreases the synaptic release of glutamate. Glutamate, as we are all aware, glutamate is one of the enzymes. I think it is a neurotransmitter. It's a molecule, a protein molecule, which slows down the transmission of impulses in the brain. So, it increases the impulses, but it acts exactly like catecholamines. So when it is decreased, then there is decrease in action potentials, and subsequently, seizures can be managed through that. So there's another drug called lamotrigine or lamictal. This drug is mainly absorbed. In fact, this drug acts exactly like valproic acid. And we are here to look at the valproic acid. But the distribution is usually lower than valproic acid. The protein binding is low also. It is usually metabolized along the linear kinetics. Linear kinetics is what we call the first order kinetics. Then second phase reactions is through glucuronidation, and then the metabolites are safely released through the urine. The half-life is approximately 24 hours. That decreases when patients take other liver enzyme-inducing drugs. It is quite effective against partial seizures, especially in adults, where it can be administered with valproate. And as I told you earlier, they almost act the same. So in patients who are receiving valproate, the initial dose of lamotrigine must be reduced because they act the same way. The adverse effects include dizziness, headache, diplopia, nausea, somnolence. It is somnolence, not somnolence. Somnolence means sleeping during daytime, and skin rash. This is a hyperactivity reaction. I want us to talk about valproic acid. Yes, valproic acid. The rest you can read on your own, please. Valproic acid has gained a lot of prominence in the last few years for simple reason that this is a drug that can be used for all types of seizures. It falls in the category of drugs called the pleiotropics. So sodium valproate also used as it can be used as a free acid. Valproic acid, it has a lot of anti-seizure activities when used as a solvent in search of other drugs which are effective against any seizure. It is fully ionized at pH, at body pH, and that leads to the formation of active forms of the drug, regardless of whether it's a salt or an acid. Of course, it's available in salt, salt of magnesium. We also have sodium, and then we have the so-called valproic acid. It is an enteric coated tablet. How does it act? Just like phenytoin and carbamazepine, it blocks sustained frequency firing. And that is very, very important because it can act at the cell membrane level. Because of that, it's quite effective against partial seizures. But again, it acts at the GABA receptor sites, where it inhibits GABA transaminase in the brain. So this is a drug that acts at two levels. It acts at the membrane level and also at the synaptic cleft. And that's why we call it the pleiotropic. Because of that, it is effective against all forms of seizures, including abscences and myoclonics. It can also be used in patients who have other primary or secondary generalized tonic-clonic attacks. So myoclonics, let me put it this way. This is a drug that virtually can be used for all types of seizures, and there's no contraindication. It has also found its place in the management of bipolar disorders and even prophylaxis against migraine. So today, valproic acid has replaced many of these anti-seizure drugs. It's well absorbed with a plasma with a bioavailability of 80%. Peak plasma levels can be observed within 2 hours. And of course, when you give it food, that decreases its absorption and consequently toxicity. It is 90% plasma bound, highly ionized and highly protein bound. Half-life varies between 9 and 18 hours, and its clearance is quite low. Approximately 20% of the drug is excreted directly as a conjugate. The dose ranges between 25 to 30 milligrams per kilogram body weight. These are drugs that can be given at very high doses. What I know in practical use, we don't go beyond 1,800 milligrams per day. When you do the serum levels, the range is between 50 and 100. Interactions, it displaces phenytoin from plasma concentrations because it is an inhibitor. It also inhibits the metabolism of several drugs, including phenobarbital, phenytoin, and carbamazepine. And that leads to higher steady state concentrations. So effectiveness cannot be achieved well with these other drugs. For example, if you give it together with phenobarbital, it may cause the levels of barbiturates to rise steadily, and that may make the patients go into coma. In fact, you're not supposed to use this drug together with phenobarbital. Toxicity, mainly nausea and vomiting, which are direct effects. That can lead to abdominal pain and heartburn. So it should be avoided. To avoid this kind of symptoms, then you just need to start with very small dose and gradually step it up, titrate it against the seizure frequency. Sedation is quite uncommon. Idiosyncratic reactions and include hepatotoxicity. Some of these patients may end up developing jaundice because it is a liver enzyme inhibitor. Other reversible side effects include spine tremors associated with the liver disease. Weight gain is quite marked in many patients. It can increase appetite. Unfortunately, just like phenytoin, unlike phenytoin, it causes hair loss. Phenytoin increases the hair density. This one does the opposite. There have also been increased cases of spina bifida, cardiovascular, especially when used in the first trimester. It can be very, very dangerous. So when it comes to benzodiazepines, please read about the following. There are 6 prototypes which are important: diazepam, lorazepam, clonazepam, nitrazepam, lorazepate, and dipotassium, and also clobazam. These ones are used mainly in emergency cases. So because when used for long, then they end up causing side effects like severe sedation. Patients who are on diazepam for long usually have very bad sedation, and that interferes with their growth, especially in children. So this was I'll give out as assignments. Read about the benzodiazepines, the 6 molecules that are available. The use of diazepam is obvious, especially in status epilepticus, where it must be given intravenous, and if not given intravenous, it can be given parectal, but not for continued treatment. Clobazam is mainly used as a drug when mothers start having menses and increased seizures. So seizures which occur during menstruation period, they are called catamenial seizures. Clobazam is used a lot. Clonazepam is an alternative to diazepam and can be used for the management of refractory seizures. I want us to stop there unless there's a very urgent question. So